Okay, so maybe bring out one or two points about this request for proposals. I'll start right off with a couple of questions that I'll answer for people. So those who might be watching this later or tuned in now. Number one is, are the awards $20,000 per award? And the answer is yes. So I know at least one person thought that it was like that was the whole pool for the 4 projects, but it's actually $20,000 per module that somebody wants to develop for this initiative. And the second question was about deployment and whether these were expected to be deployed in the fall. And the answer is not necessarily. In fact, probably not is the best answer. It's most likely that they would be deployed the first time in the spring semester. But if somebody develops one this summer, which is the intention to get going, with the May 31st deadline, and then actually started in the course in the fall, that's fine. But of course, it would be contingent on the person who's developing the module probably being already assigned to teach that course in the fall, and so it might actually work out in most cases better to do it in the spring. But there's nothing that says it has to. So it's $20,000 per award, and these can be deployed for the first time either in fall or spring. And there's no penalty for courses that are not proposing it for the fall. So this was a figure that John came up with to describe kind of a visioning of where this fits into a possible future structure of the college of engineering curriculum, which kind of breaks into 3 components. The part that we're the most familiar with, everybody, is the technical foundation. So these are the core courses of teaching engineering techniques, math, physics, and all the other disciplinary courses. At the top are the major courses and disciplinary, multidisciplinary engineering knowledge and skills, so the applications of this technical foundation. And then in between, we've increasingly been focusing on global society awareness, creative thinking, and ethical perspective. And so we see those as these pillars that are an important connection between everything else. So the disciplinary knowledge and skills is just to kind of tease this out a little more from the previous slide. These are within the 8 existing programs of study. We're doing this pretty well. The technical foundations, we're also doing this really well. And we're thinking about, not we, but the college has been thinking about for a couple of years how to approach a restructuring of the curriculum and adding things to this potentially. But then what we're focusing on in this initiative is the ethics component, these essential qualitative characteristics. And we want to have a core that produces engineers with the ability to anticipate and consider societal impacts and capabilities of techniques and technologies emerging in areas such as AI. And it really is such as AI. This is across all of the different areas of study and the application in engineering. But I think a lot of situations have been coming up recently that people never imagined were going to be a problem with respect to AI, personal privacy, and so on. So there are a number of other critical themes that could be considered. So the goal is to not simply make students aware of these issues with ethics, but engage them in exercises that put them in the shoes of practicing engineering. I think it's something that it's a challenge to do that, no matter what it is you're trying to get students to think about. But with respect to ethics, I think it's something that our intention is to make this part of a student's normal way of thinking about being an engineer, that these things will come up naturally and frequently. So as an outcome, our graduates will be equipped with practical tools for discovering and confronting ethical dilemmas as they naturally rise to future careers. So some concrete components that were put in place, and let me jump ahead just, let's see, I think I had a slide here with the context paragraph that John had written. Did I read that out, John? There was a paragraph that you had written about the gift. And we may come to.
I can fill that in if you want me to.
Sure.
Yeah. So people may wonder what's the genesis of this, particularly the availability of funding, and the answer to that is that we have the college has identified a donor who is extremely interested in this area. He is a very successful engineer. I'm not going to divulge his name or the details because it hasn't officially been announced yet, and so I don't want to steal the thunder of Dean's office or the foundation on that. But it's a person we've been speaking with for several years now, actually, and it's sort of out of these discussions that he has become excited about. You know, he was looking for something to fund within the college, and this was the idea that really resonated with him. He feels passionate about it. He feels, as someone who employs many, many engineers in his company, he sees young engineers coming in who aren't prepared for all of the ethical complexities that you get into in today's world with machine learning and big data and other things which have the potential to impact people's personal privacy and impact society in many, many different ways. And so, you know, when we put this idea before him, he embraced it very enthusiastically and said, yes, this is something which I would like to fund. So he has made a multi-year commitment to the college to fund this initiative. So that's the genesis of where this funding comes from.
Great. Thanks, John.
Good morning.
So the main components of this program that was put to the donor, and after some discussion and going back and forth, there's going to be an initial course, orientation course in fine terms, the scope of ethics as it applies to professional engineer. So this course is still being developed. It will probably be offered first as an elective in some form, but then the heart of this is going to be the development of ethics modules that can be inserted at opportune places in other courses at all course levels throughout the academic training career in college engineering. Undergraduates primarily, but also potentially graduate students in the future. And the idea here is that these modules will appear kind of in a course at a place where you know, it might, you know, fit into the rest of the curriculum, or they might be on hand to insert at the moment that some story is on the front page of the Daily Iowan that is relevant and can be adapted to current events. So, you know, this last year, there would have been a great opportunity with the Boeing 737 MAX, you know, situation, and to kind of make, you know, a module timed in its presentation with some event like that's happening in the real world. The modules will be actively maintained by faculty and instructors. Emphasis placed on making these interactive or hands-on experiences. For example, a group of 15 to 20 students could be divided into 3 or 4 subgroups, about 5 students each, and charged with playing various roles that frame the ethical conflicts that inevitably arise in the career. So, for example, again, it can include design engineers, technicians, marketing teams, basic research teams, legal teams, and each one of them, you know, could be provided with enough background and not exactly a script, but enough material that then they would, you know, actually interact with this. And it's something that could probably extend beyond that class period, and also result in the, you know, development of some artifacts of various types. And you know, while it's important, you know, to give some examples here, we're hesitant to give too many examples because we really want people to be creative about these. But the important part is that they become engaging exercises that students really, you know, go away with more than just a few facts that they learned in a lecture. It's something that they'll remember that experience throughout their career. So this current request for proposals, here's what I was looking for. This donation to support the enhancement of ethics education. The gift will provide funding for instructors to develop and integrate ethics-related content into the modules, with the goal of enhancing exposure to and understanding of ethical issues facing contemporary engineers. It's going to be awarded on a competitive basis, up to 4 awards of $20,000 each in this current academic year. So we set the deadline ambitiously for May 31st. Depending on the number of responses we get, we may be making, you know, announcements of awards after that date or as other things come in. intended, hopefully for summer academic year salary support, travel, other expenses associated with development.
Somebody asked me, whether they could use it, for instance, to hire, some professional outside help to put together, say, videos of scenarios and things like that. And the answer is absolutely. There are no constraints whatsoever.
Really, so you can hire other people from other divisions as well?
You could
You
anything
can propose
that,
those.
Oh, no, okay.
Yeah, it's not out
you
of the
can put
question.
anything that. What I was trying to say, I guess, is that there are no upfront constraints.
We finally realized we must have been in the wrong
I'm sorry. Oh, much.
room. There's a few more
Oh
coming
my
down.
gosh, you're all the one.
Terrific.
Waiting for you to take final five.
Right, yeah, there was another message sent out yesterday.
Yeah,
I didn't see
Well,
that.
we chose this room because it has these good microphones, and we were kind of feeling that maybe we would have many people coming anyway. This is being webcast right now. We have a couple of people, watching live, and it's also recorded. So, and all the materials will be available later, the slides and stuff. So yeah, you'll submit with the proposal a budget and describe, those items that you think, are needed. And if that includes like a person outside the college or even outside the university, potentially, that could be included. So the development of these 4 course modules in this first year is driven by the idea that, these could be inserted into courses in different places, in different settings. They should be designed to provide engaging experiences at all levels, so freshman through senior year. All types of courses should provide experiences that could include things like role-playing scenarios, simulations, real-world investigations, self-assessment. And again, this is not an exhaustive list, but intended to kind of give you an idea of the kind of thing that we're hoping for. The goal of immersing students in the ethical aspects of engineering practice and providing them with the tools and knowledge to navigate contemporary ethical challenges. Modules must be topically focused, and there are some examples of topics in the RFA. They must include plans for didactic training, if appropriate, participatory experiences, tangible outcomes, artifacts that document the experience, and potentially inform other students or members. They should be self-contained curricular units that can be integrated into existing courses. And self-contained, I think, is meant to mean that if you were an instructor 2 or 3 years down the road and we're teaching this course and it has worked well in the past, that you should be able to do that with the documentation and with the materials that are provided, so that it's not just the developer of the module who's able to, to present it. It should be broadly applicable across multiple disciplines, but it doesn't have to be. It's not saying it has to be applicable across all disciplines. Okay? They can be things that have limited scope if they're compelling enough.
What we'd like to see is these be designed in such a way that well, the content of this, the focus of this in a particular course, the technical focus might be to that course, but we would like the structure of this exercise, of this module, to be something that might be adaptable, so that someone could pick it up and move it into a different course. They might change the technical focus of exactly what the discussion oriented around, but ideally other courses, other instructors would be able to pick up the basic structure of these things and not have to start from scratch in terms of developing additional modules downstream. So that's kind of what we're looking for.
And have you gridded these out, John? So you want these to be like 1 lecture, 2 lecture, course grained, anything? I mean, so it just
We have deliberately not
integral
done
mode.
that.
No, you're not.
Yeah, you can propose that, but realistically, it can't be such a substantial part of
Right,
of
yeah,
the time that it really hinders the curriculum.
It's up to the instructors to decide how much bandwidth they can give to this and how they're going to do it.
But having said that, I think that what we're trying to really enable here is a new way of thinking about engineering, training, that can't leave this out. This has to be an integral component. So in terms of, thinking of this as kind of like an extra burden on a course, I don't think that's the right way to look at it. I think of it as this has to be in every course. This has to be part of every engineer's training. So as we think of, our courses during our ABET retreats and our normal, assessment and review of courses, we really should be looking at whether we're addressing, ethical concerns, and then we should be incorporating those things. And so this should actually be providing, just a better way of doing that anyway. I don't think it should be seen as something that is just going to take up time out of the important stuff in class.
Yeah, I mean, ABET's been urging us to do this for at least 10 years.
Right. And it's not as if we haven't been doing anything, right? This is just an inspired way of thinking about trying to do this in a more interactive, engaged way.
But it's not to be like a seminar course. Like, I mean, we have senior seminars and everything where you have a guest lecture come in or somebody else you don't want. And the other thing is you don't want this to be under the general educational requirement. You take a liberal arts type of class, so you don't want to make a engineering version that's a substitute for that, or do you?
No.
No? Okay.
Well, we want them to be tightly integrated into the topical discussions.
So you can't just.
So we don't want, it doesn't work to have come in and give, devote a class period to giving a lecture on the basics of ethics. Students' eyes glaze over in about 5 minutes and that kind of stuff. So these need to be engaging, they need to be interactive, they need to be contextual. They need to be meaningful to the students in terms of helping them downstream with engineering dilemmas that they're going to run into.
For those that came a little bit late, there was this slide. This was kind of the 30,000 foot view of the whole vision of the thing. And there is an orientation course that's being developed that's separate from these modules,
Okay.
which may or may not ever be appropriate as a gen ed requirement that might fit in. We haven't really figured that out. But at the moment, it's an elective course. Okay.
When you say it's an orientation course, how many hours is involved in something like
Between 1 and 3.
that? Okay.
Okay, that's still under
Inclusive.
still under
Yeah.
still under consideration.
Okay.
Right. So anyway, that's a part of what was proposed to the donor. They think that that's an appropriate thing to do. Obviously, the details of how you adapt a curriculum and students' plans of study is a bit more involved. And finally, preference will be given to proposals that have the potential for the broadest impact. But that doesn't mean that you should, in trying to meet this last criteria, break something. If it works for BME and chemical and biochemical, and it really doesn't work for the other, other majors, that's not a reason to not think of it. That's, if it's compelling enough, then that doesn't really disqualify. Some potential topics: global and diversity issues, environmental impact, sustainability, personal privacy. I already mentioned that in the context of some AI courses. Public safety and health, societal impacts of machine intelligence, source and supply chain issues, social capital respect, and transparency and accountability. I'm sure there's examples that people are thinking of here that aren't on this list. That's fine. The timetable is to design the initial 4 modules during this summer and possibly early fall 2019 and deploy them in the coming academic year. And as I mentioned right at the very beginning, one of the questions that I've gotten from people is, I don't think I can do this because I couldn't have this ready for the fall, or I'm not teaching the course I want to deploy this in the fall. That's not a problem. It can be deployed in the spring of 2019, 2020. And in fact, I think we were mostly assuming that that is what would happen. But we do expect that they would be deployed in one course, at least one course during 2019-20. There's also somebody else, I think Chris, you mentioned the, gridding these out.
Right.
There is a consideration here in that if this module, is placed in a course at a certain place in the curriculum, and then the next semester or the next year it's placed in the course that's a natural, follow-on to that course, we've got to try to avoid having students just as a group all getting the same module several times. And depending on the modules, that could be really bad, depending on what it is that you're going to do in the activity, to have some people who've already been through it, it might not be the best thing. And additional funds might be available to adapt modules for other courses. So in following years, there might be some following funding for those. So the structure was to focus on an ethical topic choice and define that. Second, identify target courses or courses that can be applied in. Give some estimate of the number of students that might be impacted, like per offering. Sufficient detail of the learning aspects to allow evaluation. There should be a plan for assessment of effectiveness. Right? Those who are in the engineering college and know how we interact with AVET, that's a critical part. And a budget. Right, that's it. Any other questions?
Can you send us this one?
We can, wherever the link, yeah, I guess we can just mail out a link to the slides and to this webcast.
And this information about the proposal structure is all in that document.
Yeah.
So that was distributed.
For the most part, I just kind of cut and pasted as a way of kind of going through it, giving people a chance to ask questions.
If anybody has misplaced that original document, just let us know and we can supply you a copy of this.
See, we have Osama and Radu and Ibrahim online. If you guys have any questions, feel free to chime in.
Yeah, so this is Ibrahim.
Yeah.
So how big is gonna be the module? Is it gonna be a couple of weeks or a couple of lectures? Not to change the main focus of the core course.
We don't really want to, be too explicit about that, but I think that to have the broadest applicability, it would probably be best to minimize the number of lecture periods that are used for this. But it could definitely and probably should include outside activity as well. So there might be, just as an example, you might use a half a lecture to introduce the module. Okay, and then a couple of days later, you have another half a lecture to somehow digest, the results of the exercise. But
Okay.
that's just one idea. They're not necessarily limited to one lecture. They don't even have to be a lecture. They could be completely outside, the course, lecture schedule.
Okay.
I have a question. This is Osama. Is this are the 4 modules independent?
Yes.
Do they have to cover 4 different topics? Do they have to be correlated or related somehow or not?
So I guess I would encourage people to work on their proposals completely independent of one another, right? You don't have, that's kind of our job to see that they're not all targeting EPS 2 or something like that. At the same, and I think that's why also in that call, it said, get a hold of us early. We're make ourselves available to talk about this. And if it looks like there's an opportunity for synergy between a couple of proposals to interact and talk about how to, kind of divide and look at different topics or target different courses, potentially we could do that early. But I don't think you should worry too much about that in writing the proposal, because the idea should be, the interesting, engaging experience and how you approach it. And then we should be able to adapt it to fit, different course or something like that, different topic, and schedule it in. Those should be less important than thinking about creative ways to engage students.
So each module would be offered or proposed by one person, or each person has to offer, or each grant request has to offer 4 modules?
No. Each proposal, each submission will be for one module. Okay, so there will be 4 awards of up to $20,000 per award, each award for one module. So the goal is we have enough budgeted for this first year to give 4 of these awards, and thereby develop 4 modules, and they should be done independently. So the number 4 is only relevant in thinking about how we're budgeting the funds for the first year.
Okay, thanks.
Make sense?
Yep, thank you.
So each module must only be talking about one focus topic, or can be 2.
It could be two if they're really, you know, if the scenario really addresses two, that's fine. And besides, the topics themselves don't have a uniform granularity, right? Some of them are broader than others. Some of them are very focused, and some of the topics are not even on that list, right? I mean, you think of things that have come up in your own careers or you're aware of.
And can like the instructors collaborate on one module? I mean, like say a few professors to work on, I mean, even they cover different topics, but they work on one module together.
Right, so multiple faculty could certainly collaborate on one. The award is $20,000 per award, so it'd be divided. But I would encourage people to work on them together. But I think the focusing, I don't want to take too much off of the topical focus. I think that it's probably better to have the modules focus on topics rather than trying to cover, you know, the whole spectrum of ethics topics. I just think it'd be more memorable that way. Other questions? Well, thanks for coming. I appreciate this, especially. We've got, not counting me and John, 11 people. That's 11 more than John thought there would be.
Well,
I'm always the optimist. Yeah.
Can you be on multiple proposals as
Yeah.
a co-collaborator?
Well, let's see. We didn't actually,
it's a one on.
yeah.
Eric, this is
We're really hoping to, just get really strong modules. And I think the effort involved would probably, that we're really hoping people would put in addition to everything else they're doing, trying to be respectful of everybody's time and demands and so on. Probably one per faculty member. But if you're, collaborating with, two other faculty members and you want to work on two ideas, go ahead and submit that.
This is like that famous fight scene for Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, right? You know, the rules are, there are no rules.
I didn't say that.
Anything is fine.
I just want noted that me, the person who
No, I mean, the point is,
acts that way.
if you have something you think is cool and innovative and pitch it, this is not a highly structured thing. This is about trying to maximize the impact that we can with the available funding. So anything is on the table as long as it makes sense.
Okay. Thanks. Bishop, thanks for calling in, you guys.
All right, thank you.
What do you think? Did you finish your posters?
I haven't even started.
But I wasn't sure that's